the Milford Board of Aldermen. Please join me as we salute our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Alderman Archiola.
Present.
Alderman Beatty.
Alderman Beatty would like to be excused, Madam Secretary.
Alderman Broster.
Present.
Alderman Casey.
Here.
Alderman Gurman.
Here.
Alderman Genatasio.
Here.
Alderman Harla. Alderman Marlowe.
Here.
Alderman Moffett.
Here.
Alderman Merenin.
Here.
Alderman Picelli.
Here.
Alderman Parente.
Here.
Alderman Vitro. Alderman Vitale. Alderman Willis. 14 are present.
14 present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. The next portion of the meeting is devoted to public comment. Statements are strictly limited to the legislative function of the Board of Aldermen. Please use every effort to limit public speaking to the permissible business of the Board of Aldermen. The time limit granted to each speaker should be 3 minutes. Residents, taxpayers, and electors may address the board at this time. The board encourages speakers not to express derogatory, insensitive, or offensive statements, or to engage in personal attacks against individuals. In order to allow everyone an opportunity to speak, I'd ask that everyone please limit their comments to 3 minutes. Anyone who wishes to address the board can do so at this time. Please speak clearly into the microphone, your name and your address. Thank you.
My name is Walt Rollins. I'm from 49 Shadows End Lane. I guess it's only a matter of time before the Democratic lunacy sweeping the nation reaches Milford. That lunacy has taken over our federal, state, and now our local government. Rising crime rates like record-setting inflation, ever-rising gas prices, and food shortages affect everyone in this room, no matter their political views. Unfortunately, all these problems can be laid at the feet of one political party that controls our federal, state, and local government. The failed policies of the lunatic Democrat Party include their insane agenda of critical race theory disguised as social-emotional learning, abortion right up to birth, the absurd policy of putting tampons in men's rooms at both high schools, as well as calls for defunding the police. After many decades of falling crime rates and being ranked as a relatively safe city, Milford's crime rate is only lower than 24% of the rest of the towns and cities in Connecticut, which means 76% of the towns and cities are safer than Milford, and the numbers used to base that ranking on are nearly 2 years old. Reading press releases from the Milford Police Department in recent months provides one with a clear indication things are getting worse. We have folks being physically assaulted in their driveways, beach parking lots, along with property crimes such as stealing catalytic converters from cars occurring regularly. Yet when the community demands a response to these problems in the way of adding more police officers to the budget, they are laughed at, ignored, or accused of political partisanship by the Democrats. Again, I doubt only Republicans are victims of crime. Unfortunately, we are all victims of Democratic Party lunacy. The Democrats believe Milford doesn't need 4 new police officers. They are partially correct. We need double, maybe triple that number. Police presence deters crimes. Having more police allows them to be seen where large numbers of people gather, like the beach where recent incidents have taken place. People don't feel secure in our once safe and relatively quiet neighborhoods. Attitudes promoted by leftist lunatics that we need to defund the police, eliminate bail, and the ambivalence to violent rioting and looting in our cities has created an atmosphere of fear and helplessness among all folks of every political persuasion. It has now reached our city. The attitude of then members of the Board of Aldermen will only increase the growing trend of citizens arming themselves to defend their families and property from the criminal thugs that threaten and prey on them. I don't blame anyone for acquiring the means to defend themselves from the growing criminal element that has been encouraged by these lunatic policies and laissez-faire attitudes when it comes to crime and criminals. You would also hope the Dems would fight just as hard to put SROs in our elementary schools as they do drag queens. The refusal to consider and grant the request for more officers is a form of backdoor defunding of the police, the attitude being everyone should fend for themselves. Be careful, you might get what you wish for. Thank God for the Second Amendment, which protects our God-given right to protect ourselves and our loved ones from those who wish to do us harm. We, the people alone, have the right and responsibility to protect ourselves when the government fails to do so. And that is something all people are waking up to as a result of the lunatic agenda of the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Hello, Jennifer Murphy, 708 East Broadway. Good evening. As I stand here again tonight, I was here last month, I wanted to share something personal that has been sitting on me for the last month or two since I watched and listened to the last Alderman meetings. You see, myself, like many parents lately, have been paying a lot of attention to legislative sessions in Hartford over the last year and a half, and more recently, over the last months, the Board of Aldermen meetings. Just because some of us parents are not present in this room, it does not mean we are not watching. It does not mean we are not listening. I can assure you many of us are watching and listening. What I'm about to share, I was not sure of sharing at first, but I can't be silent about it because I do not want someone who is currently in the situation I was in not to have an officer get there in time due to lack of law enforcement officers denied by the mayor and Democrat majority aldermen who are afraid to go against the Democratic Party. I fully believe some of you up there know it is wrong that you denied the request. You see, I am a domestic violence survivor. Over 8 years ago, 8 months before my son was born, the day I left New York to come back to Connecticut for good, I had to call 911 as I escaped a situation inside a home and was running down the street, only to end up being chased by his car with him in it while I was on foot. That day, it was 2 officers who came just in time to give me the safety I need to finally leave safely. I will forever be grateful and thankful for law enforcement, because if they did not arrive in time when they did, I am not sure I'd be here present on this earth. I have always had respect for law enforcement, but I do even more now for obvious reasons. When I heard that Chief Mellick got denied his request for 4 new officers, and then heard basically no explanation about why other than it would be reckless to do so, and what good would one more officer do, why I'm a living testament today of what good 2 officers can do. You needed to trust Chief Mello and his expertise to know he has good reason to need 4 new officers. And yes, I am a Republican. And yes, I am one of the newer members of the Republican Town Committee. But it was not under anyone's influence but my own strong convictions to show up last month and show up today to support something that should never, ever be put lower on a priority list, and that is public safety. A town and city who has strong leadership support for law and order is a respectful and respected and well-managed community. I am a single parent flying completely solo, raising my son on my own with a successful career of 24 years. So when I am spending my time on something, and I can assure you that it is something that is important to me, like this is, even if it means I have to bring my son with me. Also, just because I am an RTC member, it does not lower my value as a Milford resident, because I want to remind you that you work for the people of Milford and not the other way around. I can assure you the people of Milford would rather have more public safety than a fancy new sidewalk. I want to remind you do not have accountability to the mayor. You have an accountability to the people of Milford. Last month, it was mentioned by the mayor that crime is up everywhere in Connecticut. He's right. But he basically admitted the reason why we need 4 new officers. I will leave you with this quote: "There is no better test of a man's integrity than his behavior when he is wrong." Thank you, everybody.
Good evening, Jolynn Walker from 679 Wheelers Farms Road. Good evening. You may recall that I was here last month, and in sharing my issue, I said that I sent an email and did not get a response, especially to you, Mr. Chairman. I am a believer that if one can complain, they can come full circle and close the loop. So I'm happy to report that since last month's meeting, I resent the email with an updated contact list and heard from pretty much all of you. Maybe I haven't heard from maybe 2 of you. I am thankful that most of you reached out to me by phone and a few by email. Those I spoke with by phone, I need to say an extra thank you for listening, and you listened with understanding. I say that because you asked specific questions. You wanted to understand why I felt disrespected, beyond the fact that city officials would use my deceased husband's name without asking. You wanted to ask, why was I upset for city officials wanting to name a scholarship after his name because he was Black? I was able to express to you all that many times cloaked in goodness and niceness can be things that are very harmful and hurtful. And I can say that the devil is in the details. So again, I thank you for listening and for guiding me. You were able to show me that my request for an investigation was not in your power, but a few of you offered another route. I think it's a higher way of dealing with this. You led me to the city's website where I could fill out a citizen's ethics complaint. So I went to the website and downloaded it and shared it with my family members. And we had to ask ourselves, was it worth it? Can I really articulate what happened? Or was I just caught up in emotion? With that, I am happy to report that as of this morning, a signed notarized complaint along with 7 copies have been mailed to the to the Ethics Committee in care of the city attorney. Both Justin Rosen and Pete Smith are named in the complaint, while the actual complaint is against Mayor Benjamin G. Blake, because he participated in this as well as being the one who appointed these 2. This issue must be resolved. The problem for me and my family is we don't know if 6 months down the line, when you think it's all quiet, that you try this again. It's unfortunate, I would say, that Mayor Blake did not think enough about my allegations last month to do anything about it. He's an elected official looking for votes, and he appointed these guys, which I thought were scammers. And I'm doing this publicly because it's not just for me and my family. I don't think anyone should have to deal with this or feel like they have to deal with the smugness of city officials. I think they need to realize that they're voted into office, and they're voted into office because people see some level of trust, and that trust has been totally broken, and I don't even know how it's going to get fixed, but hopefully through the complaint it will. I would encourage any citizen who feel like they've been wronged by any elected or appointed official to do this, go through this process. And at the very least, we will be establishing a track record. Anything other than that is nothing more than gossip. Again, I want to thank you all for listening to me, listening with understanding. That was so important for me. And then giving me a way of taking this to another level. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lee Lepper, and I live at 54 Nicole Drive. I spoke at last month's meeting concerning the lack of police officers needed in this town, but unfortunately was told it was not in the mayor's budget. Also, I asked the board to do something about the control of intoxicated crowds in town after the bars close, littering of bottles and cans. Several businesses have told me that they have found used condoms in their parking lots, and also the fights that occur everywhere. If we had had more officers to patrol, we might be able to control this, but it was not in the mayor's budget. I also asked the board to contact the police department to have cars ticketed on Settlers Ridge Road, who continually park between the no parking anytime signs, but nothing is ever done. It is dangerous as the road narrows on the curve and someone eventually is going to have a serious accident. And who's responsible for that? After speaking that night, I watched the rest of the meeting online the following day, and I hate to say I was appalled as to what happened when I watched it. The mayor was trying to cover himself, saying that there was a 10% increase on the police budget. The money went for increase in health insurance, nothing toward anything with police officers, cars, or anything in that line, as far as I've been told. The mayor did no explanation as to where this 10% increase went. Why are these things not explained in detail to inform the residents where the costs go? Then Alderman Giatanasso made a motion to invite the police chief to speak at this month's board meetings, which is this evening, as to the necessity of increasing more police officers on the force. And 3 board members, and you know who you are, decided that, they said to him, "Oh, you're making this political." Are you serious? I mean, that was a joke. He asked the police chief to come and speak as to why we need more officers. He asked for a professional opinion from the police chief at this meeting. You 3 board members were the ones that made this political. The alderman did not. You were elected to represent the citizens of this town, and you continue to make your position in a personal or political party viewpoint in your voting or decision-making. If you're going to continue to do that, you need to resign and let someone who has our interests at hand to take over your position. I was embarrassed to see this happen. I also take exception to those board members and the mayor believing all those who spoke at the meeting last month was a political move on the part of one of the parties. We spoke because we were fed up of the direction the leaders are taking us, paying no heed to safety and affordability to live in this town, and not serving what we need and want. Just since the last meeting, we had a major robbery at Rite Aid, and a resident was assaulted with a Sawzall investigating noise on his property. Lastly, I spoke of the overbuilding of townhouses in the town. The town is now, well, not such a quaint and pretty center as it used to be. The building nearly on top of the historic former Smith Funeral Home is an eyesore and quite disgusting. When will it end? This overloading of buildings should have kept taxes at a sustained level with increased taxpayers covering all these new tax increases by all the new building. I remember that the mayor, before each election, always stressed how he keeps taxes down and Milford is a safe place to live. All the while, he knew about the reassessment and taxes would increase after the election. Well, they sure did increase. My neighbors are so upset that the taxes have jumped 15 to 25% in many cases on their property and on their cars, which cars should be depreciating in value as they get older, not increasing. So many Milford residents, with what is happening in this country with food, gas, and cost of living increases, are finding it hard to believe that this large tax increase is happening in 1 year. It should have been a gradual increase each year and not such a large sudden increase. Many will have a tough time covering the increase that are on a low-income budget. Thank you for your time, and hopefully you listen to what I have just said and start representing your citizens who elected you for that reason, to represent them, not your party, not your personal viewpoints. And take the advice of the police chief that's going to speak this evening and listen and act on what he says. Thank you.
Andrew King, 32 Cedarhurst Lane. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing me. I spoke at last month's meeting and I said to this board that I truly hope you are not playing politics with our public safety. I also heard the mayor say, quote, the comment was made that public safety should not be political, unquote. He then accused an alderman of making a political mockery out of the public safety, and that he's parading members of the Republican Town Committee almost exclusively. I'm glad the mayor heard my comment, and while I am a member of the MRTC, I am first and foremost a resident of this town. And I can assure you I am not playing politics. I am genuinely concerned with how our public safety is being handled by our leadership. I am concerned when I hear young people from out of town like to come to our downtown at night because they are free to go crazy as the police are told to be hands off. I am concerned that criminals think it's okay to break into cars in the post-mall parking lot in broad daylight and have no fear of assaulting anyone who sees them do it. I am concerned when our police officers are attacked and robbed because they are overwhelmed and understaffed. And lastly, I am concerned that it is not only a staffing issue with our police department, but a philosophical problem from the top down with how policing should be done in Milford. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, my concerns are real, and they are shared by many in this city. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Jeannie Cavallero, 109 Siemens Lane, Unit 25. Since our last meeting, I have been able to speak not only to the mayor, but to several aldermen, and I thank you. Again, I am requesting that Ordinance 914 be revisited. As you know, the figures in the original ordinance are over 20 years old. The easy fix would be to raise all condos the $1 to make the rebate equitable. This would cost an additional $151,164. A middle-of-the-road approach would be to adjust the rebate for all seniors living in condominiums to the new $3.25 rate that is in the amended ordinance. The evidence necessary would be daunting but doable to provide all that information to the town about who is 55 or older within them. The best alternative would be to figure out the present cost for a single-family household and adjust from there. Incorporating a cost of living increase might help in the future. The mayor has graciously said that he would help me calculate this from the Public Works budget. Unfortunately, I haven't had time since the 4th of July to meet with him, but I hope we'll be able to do so shortly. I'm sure there are other options that you could think of. Inflation has hit every household, not only condominiums. But just think how you would feel if every month you were imposed an extra $200 to $500 expenditure. That's what many condos see in their trash bills as a fuel surcharge every month. Our budgets are impacted monthly because of this. The rebate helps us, but few condos cover their entire yearly cost. I ask again for the mayor or someone on the board to research the subject and revise this ordinance so that it is fair and equitable for all taxpayers. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paula Smith, 62 Hauser Street. I'm also one of those that watched the meeting last month, and I will tell you, one of my concerns is that we appeared to give short shrift to the concerns of citizens. There was concern about the types of speakers that were coming up here, mostly from the RTC. I have to tell you, I spoke with my neighbors. More people would like to speak out. People are concerned about getting up in public, leaving your name and address, and speaking out on an issue, whether it's pro or con. It's a little concerning for folks to do that. So if we find people who are willing to do that, more power to them. It's very difficult for people to come and speak in public in front of this board. I sat on the other side with you folks for a few years, and it's a daunting task. What I expect and what I implore you to do is when difficult issues come up when it comes to the police department, please make sure for the citizens and for people who might be watching, listen, make sure you're supporting our police department. It didn't come across as if we were 100% behind our police department. There's a basic concept in psychology, Psychology 101, it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's a pyramid. And the base of that pyramid that has to be absolutely solid are the physiological and the safety and security needs of your citizens. Your board is front and center on that. You know, we look to you as a legislative board to make sure that you are looking out for us and you are coming across strong as we absolutely support our police department, we support our fire department, we support public works. These are not easy jobs. Please consider that when you're debating these issues. The other reminder, and I know Mayor Blake, when you were chairman of the board, and Alderman Vitro, you're aware of this. This is the Board of Aldermen's agenda. So you own the agenda and putting items on the agenda. There should have been no question that Chief Mello should have been welcomed with open arms to come and address this board. It was disturbing to watch it. I had someone in my office up in North Haven, used to come to Milford, came to me after the issues in the newspaper and said, Paula, what's going on with Milford? We're not going down to those beaches anymore. You know, Words matter, actions matter, coverage in the newspaper matters, coverage on the news matters. Please make sure whenever you're discussing these things to come out strong in support of these departments. The men and women of that police department deserve it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Oh, you're coming up to this board.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Smith. I live at 59 6th Avenue. Fortunately, I can't hear everything that the speakers say up here, and I'm actually pleased by that, but I heard enough. And some of us have read Mr. Rollins' letters, so we know what to expect, but you lunatic Democrats who are responsible for critical race theory, food shortages, gasoline prices. How dare you people? And you sit here like you're innocent? I'm gonna make these meetings political? Of course not. But I think we just had 5 of the last 6 speakers from the RTC with scripts. They can't decide whether they're for adding 4 more police officers, which would add money to the budget, or cutting taxes, because one wanted 4 more officers, but also was upset that his assessment went up. So it's going to cost more. Your taxes will even go up more. If there was just some understanding of public policy and understanding of economics, then some of the crazy stuff that gets said about critical race theory and Democrats responsible for fuel prices. OPEC actually sets fuel prices, but you people know that. That was something that was determined by Henry Kissinger back in the Nixon years, to let them come together and set prices. I'm sure every elected Democratic official would lower gas prices if he or she could. And Republicans, I think we share that. But the lunatic Democratic Party agenda, that's the stuff we have to get away from. And yet the lunatic Democrats didn't try to overthrow the United States of America in an armed revolt. But we won't get into that. I just want to say, I know the chief's going to speak, and he can address some of the less than informed positions. 4 officers make a difference at Walnut Beach. You'd ask the chief if it would have made a difference. They wouldn't have even been on staff till next year. Was it raised as a political issue? I have my opinion, but I've retired from that business. We do have 10 new officers, just so the people on the Republican Town Committee know, graduating from the academy and joining the force in a few months. Is that the right number? 10? Would that solve the Walnut Beach problem? You also know that the city is building a fence so we have a choke-off point so we don't have kids coming in. The city is taking steps to quiet a lot of that violence on the beach. It's happened a few years in a row. It's hard to be thoughtful about public policy when you watch too much TV, but it's our responsibility as Americans to think, something they taught me in college. Understand the issue, not just the Fox News, Tucker Carlson stuff, critical race theory and immigration caravans. And
Did you make a note of that, Madam Secretary? Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Mulrennan. Anyone else discussing under discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 4, there was no special meeting. Item number 5, Chairman's report. I just want to thank the mayor and the administration for the fantastic job they did on the blast off to summer prior to July 4th, and I think everything went great. Everyone enjoyed the food and enjoyed the fireworks and everything else that went along with it. looking forward to another great summer, as it's already been taken care of. Agenda item number 6, Mayor's Report and Recommendations. Is there a report from the mayor?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Hope everyone had a terrific Independence Day holiday. I know I did. It's my favorite time of year. I do respectfully request your consideration and action for those items on the agenda, 8A through 8C. I would also direct your attention to some appointments. There's an appointment under 8A. There's also an appointment of a building committee for the One Tudor Road property. That's the property that your board authorized the purchase of relatively recently. It's also the property, the old St. Gabe's School, where we received as a city $2.5 million in congressionally directed spending. The working group for ARPA also designated money towards remediation of that building. And I'm happy to announce the 3 members of the building committee, your very own Scott Marlowe, Alderman from the 2nd District, as well as the director of the Boys and Girls Club, Megan Altamare, and the Recreation Director, Bill Garfield. As you remember, when we purchased that property from the Archdiocese, the vision for that property was to have a new, more permanent home for the Boys and Girls Club, as well as to enhance our recreational facilities. The gym in particular, we are in need of, especially during basketball season, as well as be a space available for some community events. So, Alderman Marlowe, I look forward to hearing some updates, some reports as that building project gets going in earnest. So thank you. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, your board at the last meeting did request that our police chief attend this meeting to provide an update on our beaches. As we all remember, Walnut Beach this past Memorial Day, there was a social media promoter that brought in unruly large crowds. There was a significant incident at Walnut Beach. Since that time, the city has responded. It's been brought up in public comment earlier. We enhanced the perimeter around Walnut Beach. We brought on new parking restrictions to lock that area down a little bit more, to make sure that the adjustments in personnel and staff to maintain that beach would be more successful. At this point in my mayor's report, I'm going to invite forward the chief and the deputy chief, if he's so inclined, to provide an update and give us a snapshot of where we've been over the course of the last month at our beaches, and in particular Walnut Beach. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. If I could, just before I begin, I wanted to, after last meeting, I didn't see the meeting, I was out of town. I did watch some of it on YouTube, and but I want to thank all those aldermen that reached out to me after the meeting to discuss issues on the beach and all issues involving policing. So I appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate the conversation, so thank you.
So you're going to discuss the upgrades or the changes or modifications at Walnut Beach?
Sure, I'm willing to discuss anything, any questions that you have. As I recall, the mayor had pointed out some of, and just summarized some of those. But if I could, let me just start with what happened at Walnut Beach, because there's been a lot of attention, both with our elected officials and with the community, and certainly in the media. Years ago, we had police officers work all the beaches, and then Milford beaches became quiet. And we would patrol the beaches, but we never had to staff the beaches. And in 2020, and late May and early June of 2020, we saw an uptick in activity at the beaches, and an uptick in disorderly conduct. We saw a lot of out-of-towner activity, folks from out of town coming to use the beaches. And I think at the time, we assumed it had a lot to do with the lockdown and people coming out of lockdown and wanted to spend time outdoors. And I still think that played a lot into that. It's a destination. It's a gorgeous beach. with the boardwalk, its connection to Silver Sands, the pier, but it's also easy to access. And so we dealt with the same issues in the beginning of that season. And so we responded and dealt with those issues. We had the parking restrictions because of the emergency parking piece from COVID. The following year, we had prepared and assumed we would have similar conduct, and so we put additional officers out there. And so we had a good-sized staff, but we still dealt with people coming to the beach and behaving badly. Now, you can have 10,000 people at the Post Mall, and you can have one police officer, and it's fine until it's not fine. And that's the same thing that applies at the beaches, when people want to behave badly. And in this case, in the post-George Floyd area, we're facing, we being police, significant amount of challenges. Policing is very, very different. And police officers will tell you that. I encourage you to have conversations with them. And so what we saw was a disregarding of any of requests or commands or demands. We saw a lot of disrespect and hostility towards the police. And so we had to put more resources into that. But we were able to stabilize that. And once the summer started to kick in, and we put significant resources in there, we saw that started to dissipate. We anticipated in the off-season that we would likely see that again in the beginning of the warm weather here. And so to address that, we did a couple things. Because if we're putting police officers down at the beach, and sometimes you'll see them, but sometimes they're on the beach, they're on the sand, they're on the ATV on the sand. They were addressing parking issues, which was very important, certainly important to you folks, and with the parking restrictions that you had encouraged us to implement. And we also had to maintain the rest coverage throughout the rest of the city, and that became a challenge. So we put in place 4 seasonal temporary parking enforcement officers. These are just young kids. They don't have police authority. They're trained in how to conduct parking enforcement. So that'll alleviate a few hours a day from police officers having to spend time writing parking tickets, and it'll allow for a more aggressive parking enforcement and a greater turnover. We also put money in the overtime budget, a specific category to hire more police officers. Because I think it's important to remember that when you're putting that many officers down at the beach, you're taking them from somewhere else. And there's only so many officers that are on patrol. And I don't want to get into numbers, but you have a good part of the patrol division at Walnut Beach. And so what happens to the rest of the city? What happens to Milford Center? What happens to the Post Road? Now, I have updated stats for you, and they're no better than they were last time. But there's a lot going on these major thoroughfares in the state, including Milford. One stat that jumped out to me, the number of times that police officers have interrupted potential robberies, stolen cars. In 2018 and 2019, we'll go pre-COVID, 0. In the last 12 months, 33. These are important statistics, and the crimes that I highlighted in my last meeting, and certainly be willing to highlight those again, are important because these are safety issues. These are serious crimes. We have got to maintain a presence on the Boston Post Road. We have got to make sure that we are doing things that people can see to feel safe and to prevent crime, and things that you don't see so we can help catch those that are committing crime. And on the back end, the investigative side. And so while we're putting more resources down at the beach, those are the consequences. And what made this year unique in policing, not just at MPD, but throughout law enforcement, at least in this state, and I believe across the nation, was that police officers are not taking these jobs. The money was there. It's still there. It's in this budget as well. But police officers are being ordered in and held over to the point where they're becoming burnt out and tired, and they don't want to sign for these jobs. Years ago, there'd be a line for people taking these. We wouldn't have a staffing issue. What happened at the beach was the result of, in the first instance, we weren't aware because we hadn't intercepted it on social media, as the mayor had pointed out, with specific groups that decided Milford was the place to go. Beautiful beach, easy access. We can bring our coolers in. At the time, there was no single choke-off point. Let's go to Milford and let's have our parties and bring your alcohol and bring your pot. And so they came in droves, and they behaved until they didn't behave. And so when a fight broke out, and this happened more than once, more fights broke out. And what you see is only what you see on the camera. There's other things happening around. And then there's police officers, a limited number of police officers who now have to go into this crowd. It's a different environment now. It truly is. The days when you were young, when a police officer showed up and told you to disperse, you dispersed. Or when you saw him or her coming, you left. That's not what happens now. They don't move. They surround us. They're physically and certainly verbally abusive. And so we have this unique set of challenges now. We were able to intercept the social media accounts, public accounts of these organizers. And they still said they're coming to the beach. We don't care about the police. We're ready for them. But they didn't. But they didn't because we took every available police officer that day and put them at the beach. But that's not sustainable. There's a lot of other things that go on within the police department that need to be addressed because there's consequences. What happened when we had a call for the entire shift, what happened when we had a call for mutual aid is part of the plan. Because operationally, you have to play the probabilities, not the possibilities. And you have plans for the possibilities, both internally and externally. And so that's what we did. Although we had 42 police officers there, they still faced challenges, and they were surprised. Police officers from the state police and various communities were surprised on how difficult it was to clear people from that beach. So as the mayor pointed out, the beach is controlled by recreation, and there was a plan to put more recreation staff in place. There was a plan to put a choke point in, which is really important. In 2020, we were closing the beach at 8 o'clock in response to the problems. The police department locks the gate. Now we're doing it at 10 because there's really isn't any problems at night. We also started getting very aggressive at alcohol violations, city ordinance violations. Now, we could have been more aggressive early on. And that's another question of individual commitment. And so we addressed that as well, by making sure we put the right supervision down there to make sure those things happen. For city ordinance violations, you can pass ordinance. That's a ticket that people are going to pay. Maybe they're not going to pay. And if they don't pay, is anyone going to do anything? On a city ordinance violation, it's a fine. We find those tickets on the ground, just like we find parking tickets. They have limited effect with people that really want to behave badly. It would bother you, and it would bother me, and we would pay the fine, and we probably would never do it again. But that's not what we're seeing now with some of the folks, many of the folks that we're dealing with. So we have been placing resources. Our community policing van is down there. It shows that we have a presence, and it's there primarily to reassure the community. Because people drive by and I get calls, we don't see the police, and I'll look up and I'll look at the GPS and I'll see police all over. But to that caller, and some of those callers are in this room, to that caller, you didn't see a police officer and you don't feel safe, or that the police department is protecting people. It doesn't matter whether I tell you, well, they're here or they're there. So we want to make sure that you see the car, that you see the van. And we want people to come to us and interact with us. We were able, in that incident where police officers were assaulted and knocked over and surrounded, and cameras were stolen from them, and it's not the first time in the last few months where police officers were assaulted. I know the gentleman was up here and he mentioned Milford Center. We can talk about that, where a police officer was assaulted. But we were able to solve those crimes and make a number of arrests. And by the way, they're juveniles, so they're juvenile referrals, so they're not really arrests. And that means the parents need to be involved. And the parents need to take action as well, because we involve families in those kind of issues. And if you're from a family that doesn't want to take responsibility or do something to help, address the issues, then we have this continued problem. A lot of citizens came forward and gave us a lot of information. And there's people that, while we have computer crime analysts, they're really good, but guess what? These young kids, they can find things that we can't find. And so they let us know. So we're able to solve that. And so you don't see a lot of what happens on the back end, but a lot goes on. And that's another reason why we can't keep dipping into resources, because we're impacting the back end. And there's consequences to that. The beach has been relatively quiet. We've actually reduced what we have during the week and keep a heavy presence on the weekend. But it's important to remember that there are other things going on in Milford we started putting more on social media. What you see on social media is just a snapshot. It's a snapshot. I was going to, but I thought I didn't want to be too lengthy, give you a snapshot of what I see every weekend. And so we need to be on the post road. We need to be in Milford Center at night. We had a police officer that was attacked, and the guy that attacked him drove him pushed him across Daniel Street, and drove him into a cruiser and completely dented the door of the cruiser. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't get to his radio to push the panic button. And this is a very, very large man. Thankfully, somebody called 911, and we sent people there. I've been here a long time. I'm very sensitive to police officers being assaulted. And I'll do anything in my power to prevent that. And we all should do that. So I've brought to you a solution. And my solution to you normally is in financial terms. And we had I thought, a very good plan in terms of financial terms, in terms of parking enforcement. Having parking enforcement officers, we put money towards hiring police officers. But if you're ever interested in talking about why police officers won't sign for these jobs and why we're in the situation that we being the law enforcement community are in, and how that impacts all of you, I'd be happy to discuss that. Does anyone have if you have any questions, or I'm not sure, because I saw the agenda and I was a little confused by it. It said a brief, and so I'm not sure what you want me to address.
Alderman Parente.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. Thank you so much, Chief and Assistant Chief, for being here this evening and explaining sort of the climate we're in right now. You hold a very high-ranking position with the state. You're the chairman of Post. And can you kind of fill us in sort of what your colleagues are talking about at the state level nationally as
Sure.
you're seeing the things that you've just addressed tonight, that there is a morale issue among police officers? You're not seeing as many want to fill positions. And what
Sure.
are some solutions you guys are all starting to think about and talk about amongst yourselves? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So there's a state trend, there's a national trend of there's a reduction in the workforce. So we know that people are less likely, businesses are struggling. They're struggling finding employees. They're struggling finding employees that want to work weekends and nights. I talked to some friends that work in the hospital and the healthcare system. They're saying the same thing. So you have that problem, but now put the climate of policing right now and how police officers feel about this job and about the support that they may or may not be getting, or at least feel that they're not getting. And you have kind of the perfect storm. So what we're seeing is a reduction in the number of people that want to be police officers. We are still doing better than most communities, but we could not get 13 people to replace the openings that we already have. We were only able to get 10. Because while we had 200 that applied, which is phenomenal, by the way, because departments were, under 50, some of these departments our size. People don't want to go into policing, and we're not seeing the kind of people that I think potentially are going to be the future leaders. Now, listen, anyone can say, well, I can find someone to take that job. You can find someone to take my job or Brian's job. You can always find someone. But is that really, do you just want someone? We want to make sure that we're hiring really good people that are committed and energetic, that are well-trained, and that is sustainable over the long term. And so we don't just want anyone. So out of 200 people, 140 showed up for the test. We had about 60 pass. We could only get 10 out of that list. Because you lose about 80% on a background, polygraph, psychological, and there's a number of a battery of tests. So you lose people. So it's difficult. We are actually taking people that we've turned down 2 and 3 times in the past, and that's really what the norm is. And the reason I think that's somewhat unique, and I'll give you this example. Universities, and I reached out to universities, and we spoke about, are they seeing it, universities with criminal justice related programs? What are they seeing? They're seeing a reduction. They can't fill, they had waiting lists. They can't fill their programs. And that reduction is at a greater rate than they're seeing in some other programs, because there are some reductions elsewhere as well. And so when you're looking at that and you're having trouble recruiting people, and when you're having trouble retaining people, I'm talking about people that as soon as they hit their retirement, they leave, or people that want to leave policing as well. We just lost another officer who just moved to Florida because they don't want to get involved in policing, and many of them don't want to be a police officer in Connecticut. It's a very restrictive state when you look at compared to the rest of the nation. In terms of policy and in terms of the legal restrictions. And so we're seeing this attrition rate that is likely going to continue. I see no way that that's going to turn around in the near term. And so as we in law enforcement, both at a state and national level, struggle with policy decisions, best practices, where does policing need to go? What is the right balance? How do we continue to recruit people? How do we continue to retain people without lowering our standards? And how do we hold people accountable? And how do we develop the next set of leaders? And then how do we articulate that to elected officials who understand the uniqueness of this situation? Because we need to stay in front of it. Now, when I talked to you about additional police officers, I told you that that was long term. But we need to plan for the long term. Because, I'm telling you, as a policymaker at the state level and involved in legislation and talking with my counterparts, that's not changing. Connecticut is actually ahead of the game when it comes to some of those things. You're going to see those things happen in many other places. And as long as you keep seeing videos of somewhere police officers doing things they shouldn't do, it doesn't matter if there's 500,000 police officers. When you see illegal behavior or bad behavior, that's going to resonate throughout law enforcement. Attrition's a problem. These vacancies are a problem. And when I ask for additional officers, I'm already talking about the 10 officers that will be hired. Those are already factored in. Let me explain it this way. In 2007, we had 109 police officers. And Mr. Chairman, I think you might have been on the board back then. Is that correct? 2007? Alderman Vitale, I believe you were on the board back then. And I don't think anyone else. And Mayor, you may have been on the board and the Alderman, I'm not sure. But I did a presentation to you, and I provided you with a strong set of data that demonstrated that Milford had 109 police officers and needed 4 more police officers, and that they needed to go to 113. And it was supported by data that said it looked at the population increase, it looked at calls for service, looked at the complexity of the calls, it looked at the reconstruction of the Connecticut Post Mall, which added 6 million visitors to that mall, which added 900 cars on the Boston Post Road per hour. And we start seeing all these increases. We talked about the number of parking spaces, the number of hotels, the number of retail space that was added for construction. And so at that time, there was a commitment to go to 113. And then Mayor Riccitelli had said, let's do it 1 per year to kind of soften the blow. We got to 112, and then it stopped. And I think that was 2012, it would have been. We started off with 109. We went to 112. We added 6 more officers in 2014, 2015, 4 more officers. But those were SROs. Those are to address the problems that we had in the school, though it was post Sandy Hook when 26 people were killed, including 20 children. And we were behind the game when it came to SROs. So we added SROs, strongly supported by this board and by the Board of Education and by the community. We receive federal funding. If you recall, 50% of that is paid for through the Board of Ed budget. And then we changed and added 5 because it was in such demand. Those 5 officers are at the Board of Ed. They're at the school system. Well, they come back for 6 weeks. They spend that 6 weeks doing training or taking their time off. So they spend very little time in patrol. So we're back down to 111 officers. So we are below where we were in 2012. And what we're seeing now is where we know these crime stats are telling us, you want us on the post road, we need to be there. We need to be in Milford Center. We need to be at our beaches. And we need to do so without borrowing from other agencies, or excuse me, other departments, because we only do it for so long. So the plan that we came up with to address that was to restructure the agency. We took 4 detectives out of the Detective Bureau. We took somebody out of traffic. Those requests haven't slowed down. We took 2 people out of federal task forces. We've never done that in 30 years. We took somebody out of community policing. And we put those resources in patrol. They'll go back when this class graduates in December, but we need to get through the summer to address the problems, some of which you've heard here tonight and many of which you're aware of. Recruiting is probably the #1 issue facing policing. You know, when they passed the police accountability bill, there was this belief in this climate that what happened in Minnesota was indicative of all police officers. And so our police officers were looking at this and were appalled and recognized it as something illegal and something just horrific. And if any police officer that wasn't appalled by that shouldn't be a police officer. At the same time, they were being unfairly placed in that same bucket. And so everything that surrounded all that has had an impact. And that has had an impact throughout the state, at MPD, throughout the nation. And we're still trying to grapple with that. So when I tell you 111 officers today is not what it was before, because we have other commitments, statutory commitments that we have to put people in. But we need 111 committed people that are dedicated, not people. You know, I did a survey in anticipation of this, and we do surveys. I asked people, how are we doing? How am I doing? Do you have confidence in me? Do you feel I support you? Do you feel that our elected officials, both at the local and state level, support you? What impacts your morale on a positive or a negative? How do you feel about being a police officer? Have you thought about leaving? Would you recommend it to a friend or loved one? That's anonymous data. Got a 98% response rate. That tells you that 111 people right now are not as committed as they once were. For all the reasons I mentioned, and for the reasons that crime is my responsibility. When problems happen at the beach, when problems happen on the post road, it's my responsibility. I've been the constant here for 40 years, and I get to choose. So it's my responsibility, and when I hear that, I feel that. So we have to have a plan, both in the short term and the long term, and that plan is some of what we've already done with the increases in the budget and the increases in staffing. That plan is that we have to stop telling these police officers, you're not going home, you're being ordered in. They have to know that because that's a quality of life issue, and that's a mental health issue. But let's put that aside for a second. It's also our operational issue. You can't see all those resources at the beach and not understand that there are other places in the community where people have an expectation. They want strong response rates. They want to know that somebody's out there. They want to know that their complaints are being addressed. And if we, in an all-perfect world, could use overtime, which is still taxpayer dollars, whether you're hiring people or doing that overtime, to bring people in and hire police officers that want it to work. I mean, there's some pros and cons to that. When you have people working those extra shifts, there's a lot of data, that we discussed that talks about having officers work these long shifts, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, and what happens when they have to make a decision like a use of force decision, and how flawed, their thinking can be. I've taken all that and put that in this plan, and I put that in the budget request. I know what we value, and I respect what you value, and that shows in the budget. That shows in the funding, both who and what you value. And I respect that. We'll work with whatever funding level you give us, and I think this is a community that has always been supportive of law enforcement. I've never had a bad experience with any of you in terms of my funding request that's been presented to you. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to kind of explain what I tried to explain, and maybe it wasn't clear enough or detailed enough during the budget meeting. I know you have a lot to do, and you're probably looking to get on to the next speaker. And if I could I just address one more issue, because I watched the video and I want to clear some things up. The difference between bringing on laterals and full officers right from scratch, which is another issue that we're trying to address. We're trying to fill gaps on a law enforcement-wide level with people instead of with the right people. The preferred way for MPD, for Milford PD, is to hire brand new police officers, people that we recruited, that have passed the rigorous background, made it through the selection process. We train them in our academy, we train them the way we want them trained, and we provide additional levels of training beyond what they'll get elsewhere. And they assimilate into our culture, otherwise they don't make it through the probationary period, which is a year after they graduate. That's the preferred method. And so you probably noticed that, and I believe you did, that we have advertised for lateral transfers. Lateral transfers still have to go, and these are all regulatory requirements. They still have to go through a testing process. They still have to go through the written test, the oral test, the physical agility test, the polygraph, the psychological, and the complete background. That still takes time, and that takes a couple months. And then if they're lateral transfers, which, by the way, a lateral transfer, and I don't want to confuse you with too much, that means that within that 3-year period, you're still certified by post, which meant that you met those training requirements that are required by law. If you don't meet them, it doesn't matter if you're a police officer or not, you can't go, they'll take away your license. And then there's comparative certs that come from other states, which is a much longer process. But we're talking about people that are police officers one place and will lateral transfer over. So you're talking 2 to 3 months to get somebody in the field on a lateral transfer. But here's what you may get in a lateral transfer. You often get this. You get somebody who's really at the end of their career, they've done their 20 years, they've retired, they're looking for a second pension. But their energy level is not what it was when they were young and they were energetic and motivated. That's who we want. And so we've got to be careful looking towards that. We will take someone that's retired, and we have before, that still shows they're on top of their game. But we have to choose carefully. And if we take somebody who hasn't retired and spent a few years somewhere else, why are they leaving that agency? Were they a discipline problem? Did they not get an assignment they wanted? Are they disgruntled for some reason? Because, it's like the transfer portal in college athletics. There's like 1,000 players in the transfer portal. They leave because they don't like their situation. They go somewhere else and they're still not playing. Well, we don't want that. It's a less expensive alternative, it's more expedient, but it presents problems. But I will tell you the difference in law enforcement. 10 years ago, we were taking lateral transfers. We were averaging about 5 a week that wanted to come to MPD because they wanted the culture. They liked what was going on here. Those people have changed. And including our people, when you look at this survey, our people have changed. Pay, benefits, working conditions. That's what they want more than anything else. That's what new people want. We're not getting lateral transfers at the rate of pay that we have. We got 0. I'm trying to get one person to come over, but I have got to convince him to give up $20,000 in pay and come here. Remember with lateral transfers, they don't want to spend 25 years here, especially if they've retired. They'll be too old to be in the field. We don't have a pension that offers vested rights, which has become very popular, vested rights. So you can get somebody and hold on to it for 10 years and they get a small piece of a pension. So we're not seeing laterals. So even if we found somebody, they're not coming here. You know, a sergeant here, top grade, and a sergeant in Hampton, there's a $24,000 pay difference. And I know we can talk about the whole package, but these folks that want these jobs, they're not seeing it. Maybe they need a new actuary, I don't know. But they're looking at it, oh, this is what I want out of it, and it doesn't appeal to me. So we're not going to be able to take on more laterals. I hope we're going to get one, because he is idealistic and he likes what we have here. And so, you know, we want people that necessarily want to be here, because it's a great community. I mean, it's a beautiful town. The public supports it. Our equipment's pretty good. Our facility, not so much, but which is also in here. But other than that, you know, it's a town that I believe supports law enforcement. I don't know if there's anything else.
Chief, first of all, I'd like to thank you and the Assistant Chief for coming tonight and answering all our questions and concerns. Just have a question. The summer months in any town are the most busiest months with all the activities going on. That's also the time when the school closes. What happens to those 5 SROs that were assigned to the schools? Do they go back to regular patrol?
Sure, and that's a good question. I addressed that just a second ago. Let me just reiterate. At the end of June, or mid-June, depending on when school gets out, about a week later, they come back, and then they start up again second week in August. But there are significant training requirements, regulatory requirements, if they want to maintain their certification and their proficiency. And we train well beyond what is required. That's important. So they've got to go through their training, and they normally don't take vacation during the year because they want to be in the school. You don't want to take SROs out of a school. The schools will call you and say, we want our SRO, especially what's going on around the country. You know, we have a really good program here. We keep people out of traditional law enforcement responses. We do exactly what the programs are designed for. They want to take vacation. So while we have those 5 officers, we often we don't see them that much because we've got to fulfill those requirements. And on top of that, we also have an officer that's in the Naval Reserve that spends more than 3/4 of her time in the Navy. She apparently has a skill or an MOS that's sought after, and so while she's employed here, when she's back, she takes her vacation and she goes through training. So we see very little of her. But thank you for your question.
Any other questions for the chief? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Chief, thank you very much for your time, patience, expertise, continuity. And I think you mentioned something when you pointed out a couple of people on this board being here since '07. The important piece is continuity and knowing what's happening in the departments and where the city is going. I think you were lauded by your national expertise, state expertise. I do have a question, but I need to preface my question. We are a board that can't make it personal, but we are a board that is representative of our constituents. My phone has been ringing off the hook since our last meeting because there were a couple of examples of aldermen or people, members of this board, experiencing the same situations that people out in the community experience. Breach of their house, loss of contents in their home, and it was, I think it was summarized by one more cop won't make a difference. We did make a motion to attempt to provide you with more police. And the word of the day, or the vocabulary word of the month, was reckless. That was a reckless attempt to provide an increased staff to you in what you do for this city. You are the expert. Every department has an expert that comes here and is interrogated with their budgets, but not too many questions are always asked of the expert. You told us your opinions. We as a board listen and question you and would hope that we would come to some compromise. You want 4, maybe 2. You want 2, maybe 1. But we don't compromise. We don't discuss. We don't discuss. And it hurts me. I've been on this board for 16 years, and in 16 years, I did experience two times that we were scolded, and I felt like I was scolded tonight, with the First Amendment being disregarded, that anybody can come up here and say anything they want. But we were scolded by the former Democratic chair of the party. That hurts me, and it makes me disappointed in the fact that we, being a representative board of aldermen, that we can't look to our constituents and know what our constituents want and would like. It almost is a subliminal attempt to defund the police, in my opinion. But, that's my opinion, so I guess it would be very different on this board if we had 15 personalities here. But the fact remains, what is uppermost in my mind is that we were reckless when we attempted to increase the police. And my question, and I'll get to the question, will and does one more police officer make a difference?
I mean, I guess it's how you define it. If you define it on a singular incident, it may not. But we've got to start addressing the problems of increased crime, the problems of trying to increase coverage, and we've got to start addressing the problems of increasing our minimums so we can cover those areas and fulfill those responsibilities. 1 makes a difference, 2 is better, 3 is better. I'll be back next year and I will re-examine what it looks like, what the climate looks like, and I would hope to come here and not request any additional spending, because I'm conscious and sensitive to the fact that the result is that somehow we have to pay for that. But my job is to provide solutions and to have a plan. We've talked about the plan that we've made through the budget. I talked about the plan that we have in terms of increased, restructuring, and this is a part of the plan.
Thank you. And again, we as a board need to be confident in our experts, and you are definitely an expert in that public safety piece. And we're Milford. We're Milford, as you say, it's a beautiful place to be, but we have our problems, and the fact remains that public safety is extremely important to all of our citizens in Milford. So I applaud you for your attempt, and you're consistent in the continuity that you keep up and aware of what your needs are, and will stay at it. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Alderman Gurman. No, this is just for the aldermen to ask questions. Alderman Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Chief. Chief, thanks for coming out and your detailed explanation on everything. And I know you gave a lot more detail during the budget hearing for statistics and crime and everything that was going on in the city and all the things you've been seeing. And also you explained tonight that the last time you've added police officers was, other than the SROs, was back in 2010 was the last officer that you added. Is that correct?
It started I'm sorry, it was 10. It started in
2007.
7-8, and then it went to 10-11.
Right, so adding 1 per year. So I've been in Milford 60 years, and I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of good stuff, a lot of, maybe not so good stuff, but it's definitely changed demographics and population and not only the residents, but also, like you said earlier, visitors, people coming to see the beach or visit the beaches, the mall, the, downtown activity. There's just a lot of traffic, a lot of activity. And I don't know if it's a question, but, just a comment that, maybe we should be adding, another officer per year for a few years to get caught up to where, as you expressed in the budget hearing, that we need, you did your work, you're the expert. You don't just say we need additional staff because we need it. There's a huge demand for it. And you got in much more detail when we did the budget. So I don't know if it's a question, but it's well heard on our end that, we definitely need some more support. And just having more of a police presence, I think, is huge. But I certainly appreciate everything you're doing for the town, and I think it's definitely a well-respected police force in the state. And I just want to thank you for all that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Brozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Mello, thank you for coming here tonight and talking about summer policing strategies. And I want to thank you and Mayor Blake for taking such swift action after the incident that happened at Walnut Beach in implementing the emergency order, which, as a resident of the Walnut Beach area and somebody who frequents the beach, it's been great all summer long. With that said, and just, I know you've addressed this, so please forgive me here, but just to clarify, adding those 4 positions to the budget would not have stopped that incident from happening.
No, that request was for post the next fiscal year, July 1. And as I mentioned, how long it takes to hire a police officer and train him, there's also a period of hiring selection background for laterals, so no, it wouldn't have. Are you talking, is that what your question was?
No, yeah, thank you, Chief.
Specifically?
That's helpful for that clarity. And then when it comes to the emergency order, which seems to be helping, or at least from the constituents that I've spoken to who frequent Walnut Beach as well, they've been very happy with the changes. Have you found that that's helping? Have officers been happy with that change, and do you feel like it's...
The parking restrictions?
Parking restrictions, and then it seemingly the parking restrictions leading to less non-residents ending up at the beach.
Well, I don't think the parking restrictions were, that's really for the possibility. I don't think the parking restrictions have a direct impact right now because we're not seeing the numbers and we're not seeing that kind of behavior. But I do think what the other restrictions we put in place, we're providing additional recreation by having limits of who can go on the pier, by closing the beach down, not just when we think it's capacity, but when we start to see bad behavior. The fencing, and years ago, if anyone that's been around remembers, there was a fence there many years ago. And there was like one opening and then there was the driveway. Having the ability to funnel people in and out where recreation, the staff can see who's coming in and if they're bringing coolers. They're less likely, if they've got to walk past somebody, to be bringing in some contraband. So I think those are more important. I think the parking restrictions will help in the event that they're certainly going to help next, if we see a repeat of next May and June, or when we see large groups. But we don't see that regularly. So that's why the parking restrictions took some time to really make sure that that's what we should do. But we felt at this point that we should really focus on not just the probability, but that possibility. And I just want to be more responsive to your question. What happened at the beach was not a staffing issue. It was a behavioral issue. Because even when we had additional people there, we weren't able to stop that. And I just want to be clear, that's not what I'm talking about when I'm asking for additional officers. So the beach really isn't that relevant. It is relevant in terms of crime and the challenges policing are facing. And it is relevant in the fact that when we bring more resources and we need more resources to replace who we're taking, but I just want to be clear on that.
Well, thank you so much, Chief. Thanks.
Alderman Archeolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Chief Mello, once again, I do want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to answer some questions from us. I understand that the event at the incident at the beach was a coordinated kind of effort between kids from a lot of different schools, and you did mention that the police department monitors online activity on like Instagram and TikTok to kind of detect when these things might be. I wanted to know if you're expanding those efforts, and maybe you can expand a little bit on how the police department keeps their finger on the pulse of kind of coordinated incidents like this.
Sure. So it's difficult for us because we have to rely on public information, public accounts, and we have to be able to receive intelligence from other agencies and from residents of who's involved, who the kind of the leaders are and the organizers, and that's very difficult. It's easier to find out after the incident when we start identifying people through our camera systems, our body cams and whatnot. It is difficult to preempt that without any intelligence. That's why relationships with the community is so important, because when people tell us things that have concerns, that intelligence is then triaged and determine whether or not it's actionable or something important. But absent that, this may happen again, and we'll have to be prepared to respond to it. It's the same situation that you have in Milford Center, but more organized. If you've gone to Milford Center late at night and seen, the fights and the lines, that is really difficult to manage. We now, after the officer was assaulted, nobody can walk alone. And that wasn't something we worried about before. But people will challenge police officers and attack police officers and try to goad police officers into a physical response, into using force. And our officers are very aware of that. The camera system we have in Milford Center does a great job of helping post-event, because we're able to identify people. Our body cams do a great job. People that use social media love to share stuff, and then it gets shared, and eventually it'll get shared, we hope, with somebody that will talk to us or talk to another agency. This particular this particular event was an out-of-town event, and they were encouraging people coming from New York and from other places. We have tried to demonstrate that Milford is going to be very aggressive in these minor violations, including parking. And so when I talked about the parking enforcement, it wasn't just alleviating some time for officers not to write parking tickets. It was to make sure that if you park there and you're over your limit, that everybody gets a ticket, or at least we try. So people are less likely to come here and offend.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just ask a follow-up question. Does the police department, I want to know, is there a resource or an avenue that residents who are concerned about hearing talk of like a coordinated incident like this, is there a resource that you could point them to on social media?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand the question. A resource that they should go to?
Does the Milford Police Department have a presence on social media that, and if a resident notices something possibly brewing of a potential incident, can they share that or forward that to
Sure, we hear that a lot. We get a lot of material from residents, especially down there. If you live in that neighborhood and you see something that you're concerned about, we get a lot of that stuff. And we get it from parents too, because there weren't just out-of-town kids, there were Milford kids involved in that too. And we found, and some of the parents let us know who was there and what had happened. And we do have people that monitor social media and spend a lot of time doing that in addition to collecting other types of intelligence.
Alderman Harlow.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief, Deputy Chief. Thank you for your time this evening and your detailed presentation. Quick question, I think you covered this in our last presentation. The 10 officers that are in training right now, what is their timeline as far as finishing the academy and coming out to the field?
Sure. So I just want to be clear that those officers are already baked into the equation. They will then fill positions that are now vacant. It'll reduce ordering people in, but we will have 7 openings by September in addition to these. So we will have to do another class back-to-back. But to answer your question, they'll graduate sometime in December, likely beginning middle December. Then they'll spend 3.5 months on field training, which is part of a training process. When they finish that in March, then they'll enter into their probationary status, where every month they'll be evaluated, they'll be at-will employees, and at the end of that process, then they'll become regular police officers and will be mostly out on their own. It's a long process.
Alderman Casey.
Thank you. Chief, I think you said, and your earlier comment said, it's difficult to get a qualified officers in Connecticut to, be a police officer. Why is that so? And what's your long-term or short-term plan to address this like this? Because what is the reason that people don't worry about becoming a police officer in Connecticut, and what's your plan to address it, if anything? Thanks.
So that's a complex question, and I certainly want to answer that, and I can provide you with some very detailed information and data. But when you look at individual departments, culture differs. Morale, I hate to use that term because it's kind of just a snapshot, that differs. But post George Floyd, and as I mentioned, I think it's very important, we were all appalled at what happened. And there's others like that. There's far, far more videos of police officers doing amazing things and police officers dying, being killed, and being assaulted. That plays into a police officer's psyche, right? Because they know those things are present. We certainly know that here in Milford. And so as that happens, and as police officers start to feel like they're being unfairly criticized and lumped into this pool and being demonized and called things and accused of things, and this happened to me personally, my home address being put on social media and having to wonder if someone was going to show up at my house and were they going to be violent. And so they've gone through all this, and they've listened to the debate, and they've seen early iterations of legal restrictions and policy restrictions that actually, at the end of the day, when it was all finished, there was some really meaningful stuff that came out of that. But many police officers will tell you that legislative and policy restrictions have changed their opinion of the job and their desire to do the job. Here's what also changes, but doesn't really happen here in Milford for some reason. The way they're being treated. And you can't even get someone often to give you an ID. And the way they know when they stop a car, they worry about the accusations that are going to be made, potentially going to be made. And so they're worried about those things, and those are ever present. And so that has, and our survey kind of proved that as well. So I think it was the climate, the debate, the kind of the demoralizing accusations, and I think that they haven't recovered from that. And so I said this during my my budget hearing, and so it takes leadership, and that's what we talk about a lot. We talk with our peers, and I've spoken to other agencies. Chiefs have asked me, come in and talk to my people because here's how they see things. And you can see different agencies that are dealing with this in a much easier way, and some that think that if they do anything, they're likely going to wind up in jail or appeared on YouTube, and that that there's these restrictions that are preventing them from keeping people safe. But the reality is, it was more all the debate, and it was the fact that they still don't feel supported externally. Why would anyone want to come into this job and deal with that? And so people are shying away from that for those reasons. And that's a very summarized, kind of short answer. But you can look at each area. And we spent a lot of time setting the table for our officers and letting them know. Our city attorney came over and talked to them. Look, while they're trying to take away qualified immunity that all other government employees still have, or qualified immunity as they called it, governmental immunity as we call it in the state level, nothing at the end of the day really changed for the individual officer and their liability. And John was great, and he looked at it and he called me and he goes, hey, I understand the debate and what maybe some people are trying to do, But when you look at this new language, nothing's really changed. You've always been responsible for a willful and wanton act or a conscious disregard for somebody's constitutional right. That has never changed. And the city attorney came over and he spoke to our people, and he still speaks to our people. We brought experts in, legal experts. We spoke to them ourselves. We had a seat at the table. So I think we're handling it better. But even though our officers know that there was some good stuff that came out of there, some important stuff in terms of how to conduct yourself and how to keep yourself safe, not just physically safe, and about accountability, they will go back to this whole idea of the way we were treated. They watch everything that you do here. Even if they don't personally care, they want to see, are we supported? And I've talked to a couple of you privately. So it's not just leadership at the PD level, it's leadership at the state level. I believe that that's why we probably did some of the things we did with providing social workers and providing, additional monies and things like that. I think, and so I think that we've done a pretty good job when it comes to that, but we're still seeing some of those effects.
Mr. Chairman, I know that we're still on the mayor's report, and I do want to take the opportunity to thank the police chief for providing the data, the analysis, the expert perspective over the last hour and a half. I know that we asked for a beach update and we got a lot more, and I think that's reflective or characteristic of the Milford Police Force, that we get a lot out of the men and women that serve our city each and every day. Milford continues to be the best trained, best equipped police force, certainly in the state of Connecticut, and I think that you see tonight the great leadership that we have driving that police force forward, making sure that Milford's finest continue to be the best in the state. So, Chief, again, thank you for coming out. I know that we had a lot of questions. I appreciate you bearing with us and providing that nice update. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the police chief a question before we move on to the next item. I've been waiting patiently.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good evening, Chief Mello and Assistant Chief. Thank you for responding to our common call. We all requested that you'd be here tonight, and we appreciate the update. It would be very interesting to me to know that this is the plan that you proposed. The 4 police officers, the additional officers, was part of the long-term plan. We've had discussion here tonight, and I'm happy that we have 10 officers that are in the academy. I understand you're working on some lateral transfers, and we've done some infrastructure at Walnut Beach. And I do agree that this was an isolated situation. I do agree with that. But what is bothersome to me is, we're still talking about, well, would this have happened if we had 1 extra police officer versus 2, 3 to 4? And to me, that doesn't represent leadership. I think you have to look at this objectively. And the police chief went to the mayor, requested the 4 officers as long-term based on data projections. And I'm interested to know, Chief Mello, is when you proposed this to Mayor Blake at that time, we know it all didn't make it to the budget. What was his answer for not allowing 4 more police officers? And before you answer the question, if it was due to additional spending, I can tell you this, by sitting on this board and adopting this last budget, it wouldn't have affected our taxes at all. So I'm interested to know what his response was.
So in the budget the budget meeting with the mayor, I believe Peter, I just realized Peter's not here tonight, finance director and the deputy chief, and I believe Justin Rosen might have been there. My focus was really on making sure I put my emphasis on social workers, licensed clinical social workers. That was my first priority, because I thought that that's so important to provide this valuable service and valuable resources for the community, especially our most vulnerable. and it's proven to be true, and they're doing an amazing job. And we also looked at the plan in terms of trying to bring on a parking enforcement. In the past, I've asked for dispatchers because we still have police officers in dispatch, and that just shouldn't be. And when we had the discussion on the 4 officers, that was it. I explained why I had them, and the mayor said he would consider, as I recall, what was in the, he would consider my budget request. But there was no additional conversation, nothing about funding. The only, and I hope this is appropriate to be talking about this, but I believe the only thing that we talked about with funding was whether you were going to pay for some of these items, because the increase in policing, some of that is statutory, right? We know that the police accountability bill put a lot of money, a lot of financial burdens on the municipalities, and so there was a discussion on whether that was going to, and it wasn't really concern me where that would come from, and I believe I may have at some point said we can take the police officers out of ARPA, and I referenced what President Biden had said and then had resaid. And I think some of you have seen the article. I'm not sure if it was then or later on, but it was a very limited discussion.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just to follow up. You mentioned ARPA, and I know that you mentioned the fact of funding it through that. That came up during the budget deliberations as far as, getting it out so we can get ahead of crime and curb the crime and have these additional officers, in the queue. So the police officers that are there now that are being held over, they didn't even receive any hazard pay through the ARPA. I mean, they're first responders. I mean, they're mentally fatigued. There was no conversation of that. I think that is something that's worth showing the police, the Milford police, that they're valued. And we want to make the people that are here tonight feel safe. And I think that you explained that. And I know that the police can't be in 3 different parts of the city all at the same time. And it makes complete sense. And that's what frustrates me, because sitting up here, I want to make a difference. Not just for the people in my district, but the whole city. I mean, I've been here a long time. And this was an opportunity. And it was a missed opportunity. And, where do we go from here? I don't know. You said tonight in your submission that the data is still there. It's not going down. It's going to become more challenging. I mean, we're in a recession. People are going to get more desperate. I mean, I don't know, and everyone's talking about, oh, well, this wouldn't have made a difference if we had 4 more police officers, and that wouldn't have made a difference. I reject that. I mean, so does it make a difference if you lock the door, your front door at your house at night? Should we just leave our doors open? Is that going to make a difference if we lock our doors? I think so.
Alderman Giannatasio, you need to wrap that up, because we took enough of the chief's time.
Okay.
So, wrap it up.
I understand, Mr. Chairman.
And again, Mr. Chairman, this is still the mayor's report, and we've kept the chief now almost 2 hours. We haven't been able to go to the substance. If there's a real legitimate question, as opposed to political grandstanding.
No, it's not.
You can keep politically grandstanding. You've done that meeting after meeting after meeting. This is my report. This is still under the agenda item for my report, Alderman Giannatasio.
I understand that. I'm going to finish up here, and don't you worry about anything. You got enough problems. Thank you, Chief Mello. Thank you for coming tonight.
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to again thank the chiefs for the patience and the understanding, and again, putting up with some of these questions. Thank you, Chief.
Alderman Harlow, there is no unfinished business. Move on to new business. Agenda item number 8A.
Agenda item number 8A, the Board of Aldermen approval hereby requested for the appointment of Catherine Hurley of 46 Bedford Avenue as a member of the Milford Golf Commission to fill a present vacancy, term expiring December 31st, 2023.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. At this time, will our newly confirmed Golf Commission members step forward and raise their hand to be sworn in by our city clerk? Congratulations, Mrs. Hurley. And we'll move on to agenda item 8B, Alderman Harlow.
Agenda item number 8B, the Board of Aldermen approval is requested for the attached resolution regarding the grant application for Consolidated Housing and Community Development Plan.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Alderman Parente.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, could you just give us a summary about this, this annual amount that's come in? It's part of the 5-year plan, correct?
So Milford is one of HUD's entitlement communities in the state of Connecticut. There are not that many. We receive about $500,000, a little bit over $500,000 each year. And Sheila Dravis, who is our Community Development Block Grant Coordinator, is the administrator for this program. We have to primarily focus on low to moderate areas of our community. There are some exceptions. For example, you see some of the requests are for ADA compliance. Some of the funding goes to a new elevator in the library, handicap accessibility for some of our streets. But this is the annual program that we do each and every year. There's an application process. There is a community panel that vets it and makes recommendations to the Community Development Administrator before we put it together for final approval with your board. If you have specific questions about the program, again, Sheila is here to answer any questions.
Sure, I'd love it if you would come up and just give us all a bit of a summary on this year. I think you just got the approval in May, is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And maybe if you could just go through the different items. I know that about 30% was allocated to the library improvements.
Yes, so we did get our final award in May. That's kind of typical. But, so the grant itself is broken down. I kind of take it from, there's a cap for public service, that's 15%, and then there's a cap for program administration, and then the rest falls into a community development category, which can be broken out by application. It's broken out with public facilities, housing, so there's 3 or 4 housing programs that we run, varying each year, but usually always a single-family program, the first-time homebuyer program. I just started a new small repair program specific to the amount of money that can be spent, kind of geared towards fixed income residents. And we have, as the mayor mentioned, typically a sidewalk, ADA sidewalk program, where the Public Works runs that. And what else? This year, yeah, the library has taken up most of the public facility grant, budget, which is well-spent money. We hope we come under budget. We'll see.
Was there any shifting of how you decided to allocate funds based on COVID? Because was any of the guidance changed from the state or federal level around serving disproportionately impacted communities?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we did get a separate CDBG allocation specifically focused on COVID-19. So this past year, we did receive a separate grant from HUD because we are an entitlement community, because we participate in this program that was focused on COVID-related issues, and it's something that has come before your board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all the questions. Agenda item 8C, Alderman Harlow.
Agenda item 8C, the Board of Aldermen approval is requested for the attached resolution regarding the Milford Fire Department training opportunities.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Alderman Giannattasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the city attorney, if you could just give us a brief background on this resolution, please.
Sure. Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Alderman Giannattasio. From time to time, the fire department has opportunities to conduct training at structures that are scheduled for demolition, and I think it's an invaluable tool. But property owners will ask that the city indemnify them from any claims arising from that use. So, for example, if a firefighter goes into a building and they're conducting training exercises and injures him or herself, the property owner wants to know that they're not going to be sued. Of course, the city is going to pay for that firefighter's injuries through workers' comp, but also there's third-party liability. And in order to indemnify the property owner, there's an agreement. That's a potential future financial obligation of the city, which requires legislative approval. What we have seen, at least in the course of my 11 years as city attorney, is the fire department, some of these times, they get approached, hey, do you want to train here? And they have a week to do it. And it doesn't fall within the schedule of the aldermanic meetings. So what's before you tonight is a policy saying that you, as a legislative board, is authorizing the fire department to enter in these agreements whereby the city will indemnify property owners in exchange for the right to conduct the training. I know that there's a couple instances where they've missed out because I'm the stick in the mud, saying, no, you can't sign that. You can't go forward. As part of your backup, those are not the indemnification provisions that we're asking you. Those are exemplars from previous ones. You'll see that the policy, I think it's mislabeled as 8B, but at the top, but it's a resolution, which basically is giving the fire department, and Captain Halpern is here tonight and been very patient and looking very dapper in his uniform, and very patient with me as I kept telling him no, that we needed this board's approval. So that's basically the background.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, item number 9, there is no new business.
Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Giannattasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of the police chief's testimony here tonight, I would like to present a new business agenda item in order to fulfill the police department's long-term plan. I'm requesting 4 police officers, give the police chief the liberty to hire 4 additional officers, which will cost $254,720 I'm referring to our budget book, page 49, Schedule J. That's in the form of a motion.
Second.
In order to put an agenda item on the agenda, we need a two-thirds vote to put it on. So we have a motion and a second to put on an additional, the motion was to put on additional 4 officers.
I'd like to call a recess.
back off for recess. So we had a motion and a second to put that item on the agenda. We have to vote on that. We need 10 votes to put it on the agenda, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Roll call vote, Madam Secretary. Yeah, I'm sorry. That recess screwed my whole schedule right up. We need to have a discussion. The motion was made and seconded. Now we have a discussion. I'm sorry about that. Discussion on the motion. Anybody have a discussion? Any discussion on the motion? There isn't? Alderman Brochure.
Mr. Chair, point of information. What is the mechanism for funding this? Just a point of information. What is the mechanism for funding this position?
What we're doing now is we're voting on to put Alderman Giannatasio's motion on the floor. Put it on the agenda.
But it's germane to the conversation due to whether or not this is being something reconsidered that has already been voted on, which therefore this would be a moot point.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. The fact is, in order to have a discussion on there's no motion other than whether we want to put it on the agenda or not. Not funding will come into, I would imagine, funding and the way to pay for it would come into when the motion was actually made. But the motion is just to put it on the agenda to make another motion to hire.
Point of order, we're then making a motion to put something on the agenda that can't be reconsidered to begin with if it is being funded by a mechanism that has already been established here.
No. Could we have an interpretation from the city attorney, please?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the city attorney is not the parliamentarian to this board, but I believe the motion that's before us is a motion to put a specific resolution onto the agenda. You need a 2/3 vote. The resolution that was proposed by Alderman Giannatasio was to add additional officers. There was a provisional budgetary line item that covered base salaries only, no other costs. It probably represents about 60% of the costs of that officer without any overtime. And I guess the question that Alderman Broser had was, where would that money come from? It would not be part of the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget because taxes have already gone out. Would there be some type of budget memo transfer? Would there be some type of allocation transfer? Would there be some other type of funding source? Because incumbent upon wanting additional items for city spending is the requirement to fund those items. And I think that's what the point of inquiry was. That's just my take on it. I'm also not the parliamentarian. I'm just trying to catch everybody up because there was a recess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, Alderman Giannatasio, you want to repeat the motion, please?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Proposing 4 more officers, base salaries $254,720 in the form of a motion. And Alderman Casey seconded the motion.
Thank you, Alderman Giannatasio. So the motion was on the floor, and we had any more discussion on the motion? No more discussion on the motion. We're going to vote on the motion to see if it was going to be put on the agenda. All in favor?
Can I just have a point of clarity first? So just to be clear here, so there's no discussion for this motion?
We just had the period of a
No, I
discussion, and
understand
nobody wants to have a discussion,
Okay.
so we're going on to the vote.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Alderman Harla. All those in favor? Opposed? Alderman, Madam Secretary, please have a roll call. Thank you.
Alderman Archiola?
I think we were supposed to have I wanted to say something. I think someone else might have. I think it's just a little confusing. Maybe we need to kind of reset and do it again.
Did you want to have a discussion? Yes. That's what I asked for, a discussion on the motion, and nobody raised their hand, so then I went into the vote. You want to have a
So
discussion?
I would just like to say that, through you, Chairman, that I was really appreciative that the chief came. It was really edifying for me to understand that both here and nationally, that we're seeing a lot of current police officers who are facing issues, mental health issues, things that are not being supported necessarily in the way that sort of we have to think about nationally as a country. And I take to heart everything he said. I think that we want to be supportive of our officers here. The mechanism by which we do that is something that we're going to have to discuss further at a later time. I don't support this motion being added tonight.
Alderman Harlow.
I too would like to contribute to Alderman Parenti's comments and take a look at for a moment the timeline of what the chief was so kind to outline to us tonight in regards to the 10 officers that are currently in the training program, followed by another 7 officers that will be in the training program after the 10 graduate and are brought into the field. If you look at the chronological and look at the calendar, those 10 officers, according to the chief, would not actually be in the field until next summer. The 7 officers following those 10 in the training program, as it plays out, probably wouldn't be in the field until maybe next fall or next winter of 2023, 2024. So in just looking at that statistic and that data, this is obviously and definitely something that's in the forefront of all of us as citizens of Milford, as alders of Milford, that we want to continue to place and keep very, very close pulse with the police department. But right now, when we look at the timeline, look at the necessity, and look at exactly what some of the issues are with the police department and their ability to staff for the existing positions that they need, we see it also as a possibility and a probability that these positions could be funded in next year's 2023-2024 budget with a very minimal, if not any, interruption in the staffing of the police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Harlow. Any other discussion? Alderman Moffett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say the thing that I took from the chief's remarks were that because of the current environment, it's very difficult to hire policemen. He had 13 jobs open, he was only able to fill 10. The police department's going to be handing back hundreds of thousands of dollars to the city in unspent salary. I think a good use of our time in the coming months, since this budget's already been passed and approved, is to come up with programs and systems that the chief can employ that'll help him bring in the quality of officers that he's looking for, so that he's got a full slate of officers to help us defend the city.
Thank you, Alderman Moffett. Any other discussion? Alderman Giannatasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. My thoughts are, it's another missed opportunity for the citizens of Milford. And I think really, for the chief, I think this is part of his long-range plan to move the city forward, the police department forward. As he indicated, the city's grown. We have more commercial buildings, we have more residential, we have apartments, we have a downtown, we have beaches. And I said this before, we have it all, but, he needs additional people in addition to what Alderman Harlow mentioned. That's all, in the present, but this is, moving forward, looking forward. And I think, all of us in our own way, in our own private lives or in our businesses, we all like to plan ahead. And, the chief knows this intimately. He's a professional. He's was one of the first police chiefs to bring the body cameras to light to Milford. I think in supporting public safety, I think you need to rise against crime. And I think that this is an opportunity to do that to show the taxpayers, to show the police chief, to show the officers that are working, that are being held over, hey, these guys got our back. He said that tonight. He said they watch us. They watch what we say, they watch what we do, you know, and I think it's all part of it. We have to work, you know, as a community, elected officials, the heads of the departments, you know, and I don't understand why you wouldn't want to do that in the first place. You know, it's just best practice at this point, and you know, it's staying ahead of the curve of crime. You know, we take recommendations all the time. Finance department, if there's an arc and our actuaries tell us, well, we need to contribute more to our pensions, that's what we do. Or we have an opportunity to pay off bonds because of the interest rate. That's what we do. I mean, this is what we do here. This is just another mechanism, another component, and we could afford to do it. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I thought that, you know, you'd be a little more reasonable, maybe at least come back with 2 police officers. But now you were talking about the next budget cycle, but once again, if they're put in that cycle, then it's even further out more. So what are we talking about? 4 more police officers in what year? 2024? I don't know. I mean, you know, I just think it's something that we should address here tonight. But thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman. Hey, no problem. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
Roll call vote, Madam Secretary, I'm sorry.
Alderman Archila,
No.
Alderman Casey,
Yes.
Alderman Gurman,
Yes.
Alderman Genentasio, Alderman Harla,
No, for the reasons I stated in my commentary. Thank you.
Alderman Marlowe,
In favor.
Alderman Moffett,
No.
Alderman Morenin,
No.
Alderman Pacelli,
No.
Alderman Parente,
No.
Alderman Vitro,
No.
Alderman Vitale, and Alderman Willis. Eight against, 5 in favor, 1 abstention.
Once again, I'm sorry, Madam Secretary.
8 against the motion.
Yep.
5 in favor, and 1 abstention.
The motion to put it on the floor fails, 8 to 5 with 1 abstention. Next item on the agenda, item number 10. There is no budget memo transfers. Agenda item number 11, moving on to refunds. Alderman Harla, agenda item number 11A.
Agenda item 11A, consideration of refunds in the amount of $7,560.68.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 12, are there any reports of standing committees? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 13. Are there any reports from any special committees? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.